Good news, everybody. There's yet another VS Code fork. I know you're tired of all this crap. I get it. We've seen Cursor, we've seen Windsurf, we've seen Tray, we've seen everything. But this one's different. This one's different because it was built by Amazon. Yes, really. And since I used to work at Twitch, which was owned by Amazon, I have been hearing things about Kiro for quite a bit now, and almost everything I've heard has been really good. Even from people outside of Amazon, it sounds like Kiro is one of the better AI code options now. So much so that the hype caused them to put up a wait list when before you could just sign up because it was overwhelming Amazon Bedrock with traffic. There's a lot of potential here, and I'm lucky enough to have snuck in before they cut it off. So I'll be able to dive in depth with you, not just on what it's like to use it, but the reasons that they created, as well as the source code, which somebody managed to get out of the bundle and cover for us in depth. There's a lot for us to dig into here. I'm going to do my best to cover all of it. But since I haven't been paid a salary by Amazon or Twitch in like 5+ years now, someone's got to cover these costs if we're keeping this unbiased. So quick word from today's sponsor, and then we'll dive right in. Writing code has never been easier thanks to all these awesome AI tools. However, making sure you have the right team to do it has never been harder. Be it hiring the right people or scaling to the right size depending on what you're building, scaling up and down, having the right levels of seniority, making sure you're sourcing good people. Hiring just kind of sucks, especially if you need people for unknown lengths of time. It's basically essential that you have a flexible hiring process, but that means you have to hire a bunch of recruiters to manage this crazy, chaotic pipeline. Unless you use today's sponsor, G2I. These guys will be your hiring pipeline. They will do all of the pieces you need in order to hire the right people. They'll do the first set of interviews themselves. They'll take your questions and record video responses from the candidates. And if you need to hire a couple senior engineers to get you going in the first couple weeks of a new project, and then hire 1 or 2 long-term junior engineers to maintain it going forward, or you need a bunch of contractors to throw together this crazy new thing that you're building, or you need a couple senior engineers that worked at FANG companies, whatever you need, and your needs will change over time, you need hiring and recruiting that can scale and shift in its shape based on what your needs are at any given time. There's a good chance you don't know what you need right now, which is why you shouldn't be hiring a bunch of recruiters to lie to you and tell you to go hire 15 people so they get their bonuses. And now you're stuck with this huge staff of people that you don't actually need. The reason all these companies are doing layoffs is because they hired way too many full-time employees because they had a short-term need. Don't make those mistakes. Hire with someone who understands how to be flexible and shape the need of your business around the people that you hire. You need to shape your hiring around your current needs, and you should shape the timelines along that as well. If you need to hire engineers, this is the place you should start. Take my word for it and check them out at soydev.link/G2I. So let's start with the actual intro from them, and then we'll start playing with the app. And if we have time, we'll dig into the source code as well, because there's a lot of fun stuff here. Shout out to all the people who put the effort in to reverse engineering this, in particular, Jeffrey Huntley. Really appreciate that deep dive. Let's start from the top. Introducing Kiro, a new agentic IDE that works alongside you from prototype to production. They use this phrasing a lot, and I have feelings because this sounds like you want to use it from prototype level and keep using it all the way. But from what I have heard, this is recommended internally for things that already exist that are these big production code bases. And historically, I've had varying levels of success with different tools and different code base sizes. In fact, when a code base gets big enough, I kind of give up on using Cursor for finding information and prefer to use tools that are good with the absurd context sizes, like Augment Code. I've talked about them a bunch in ads, but when I want to find something in the React code base, Augment I found to be one of the best at handling these gigantic context sizes. I don't understand quite how they do it, but it's really cool stuff. Kiro supposedly handles those big code bases well, but the prototype to production language suggests otherwise. We'll see as we dive in. I'm sure you've been there. Prompt, 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 and you have a working app. It's fun and it feels like magic, but getting it to production requires more. What assumptions did the model make when building it? You guided the agent throughout, but those decisions aren't documented. Requirements are fuzzy, and you can't tell if the application even meets them. You can't quickly understand how the system is designed and how that design will affect your environment and performance. Sometimes it's better to take a step back, think through decisions, and you'll end up with a better application that you can easily maintain. That's what Kiro helps you do with spec-driven development. The other piece they're really driving in here, it's some weird fusion of spec design, like the classic Amazon papers before publication of a project, as well as test-driven development. This in-between of the two, where you write a spec alongside AI and then write the code to fulfill the spec. Excited to announce Kiro. Interesting that it's I'm when there's 2 authors. They're trying really hard to make this feel personal and less Amazon-y. Like there's no Amazon branding anywhere here so far. Excited to announce Kiro, an AI IDE that helps you deliver from concept to production through a simplified developer experience for working with AI agents. Kiro is great at vibe coding, but it goes way beyond that. Kiro's strengths is getting those prototypes into prod with features such as specs and hooks. I'm sure that language won't get confusing at all. Kiro specs are artifacts that prove useful anytime you need to think through a feature in depth, refactor work that needs upfront planning, or when you want to understand the behavior of systems. In short, most things you need to get to production. Requirements are usually uncertain when you start building, which is why developers use specs for planning and clarity. Specs can guide AI agents to better implementations in the same way. Kiro hooks act like an experienced dev catching things that you miss or completing boilerplate tasks in the background as you work. These event-driven automations trigger an agent to execute a task in the background when you save, create, delete files, or even on a manual trigger. So what's the way to build with specs and hooks? Kiro accelerates the spec workflow by making it more integrated with development. In our example, we have an e-commerce application for selling crafts to which we want to add a review system for users to leave feedback on the crafts. Let's walk through the 3-step process of building with specs. Fun, they're teaching us how to build an Amazon competitor with Amazon's IDE. From single prompt to requirements. Kiro unpacks requirements from a single prompt. Type, add a review system for products, and it generates user stories for viewing, creating, filtering, and rating reviews. This feels so corporate. Each user story includes ears, the easy approach to requirement syntax notation, and the acceptance criteria covers edge cases developers typically handle when building for basic user stories. This makes your prompt assumptions explicit, so you know Kiro is building what you want. So here we say add a review system. It then creates a review system for products. Let me start by creating a spec for the feature. Check if the directory exists, then create requirements.md for the product review system, and then it fills out Markdown. You read that and make sure it fits your expectations. And then we have the next step, the technical design, which is based on the requirements. Generates a design doc by analyzing your code base and approved spec requirements. It creates data flow diagrams, TypeScript interfaces, database schemas, and API endpoints, like the review interfaces for a review system. This eliminates lengthy back and forth on requirements and clarity that typically slows down development. So here, you approve it, and then it creates the technical requirements and component hierarchy. So this is which components go where in the system. Seems a little absurdly complex for something as simple as reviews, but sure. And then we have the implementation part. Kiro generates tasks and subtasks, sequences that correctly based on, Kiro will generate tasks and subtasks. Kiro will generate tasks and subtasks, sequences them correctly based on dependencies, and then link each to the requirements. Each task includes details such as unit tests, integration tests, loading states, mobile responsiveness, and accessibility requirements for implementation. So it lets you check work in steps rather than discovering missing pieces after you think you're done. Oh boy. We'll auto-generate all of these tasks and subtasks, and it looks like it's very willing to generate a large number of them. Should be fun. The task interface lets you trigger tasks one by one with a progress indicator showing execution status. Once complete, you can see the completion status in line and audit the work by viewing code diffs and agent execution history. Kiro specs stay synced with your evolving code base. Developers can author code and ask Kiro to update the specs or manually update specs to refresh tasks. This solves the common problem where devs stop updating original artifacts during implementation, causing documentation mismatches that complicate future maintenance. I will say for a fact, this is a very common thing, at the very least at Twitch when I was there, where docs would go out of date aggressively and the only accurate documentation was the code. If this was just pitched as it keeps the docs up to date based on code changes, it would be cool. The way that they're adding the docs into the code also is cool. I like the idea of like how the code works being part of the code base instead of being stuffed in weird Slack channels and other places in Google Docs or whatever. I don't know how I feel about it being the source of how the development goes, though. And then their big point for hooks at the end. Point 4, catching issues before they ship with hooks. Before submitting code, most devs run through a mental checklist. Did I break anything? Are tests updated? Is the documentation current? This caution is healthy, but it takes a lot of manual work to implement. Kiro's agent hooks act like experienced devs catching things that you missed. Okay, so it's kind of like commit hooks. Hooks are event-driven automations that execute when you save or create files. It's like delegating tasks to a collaborator. Set up a hook once, and Kiro handles the rest. Some examples. When you save a React component, hooks update the test file. When you modify API endpoints, hooks refresh the README files. And when you're ready to commit, security hooks scan for leaked credentials. I'm sorry. The fact that leaking credentials in your source code is such a problem today still is pathetic. This is the case I have heard so many times for why commit hooks make sense. Stop putting your fucking secrets as strings in your source. There's a certain level of dev incompetence that I think is a fireable offense. And that tier is like 3 tiers above committing fucking keys in your source. Like if you're employed and you're collecting a salary for writing code and you're still doing that, that's on you. God, no, that makes me question the validity of the rest of this. That's actually one of the like core examples that they gave. Ugh. Hooks enforce consistency across your entire team. Everyone benefits from the same quality checks, code standards, and security validation fixes. For our review feature, I want to ensure any new React component follows the single responsibility principle, so devs don't create components that do too many things. This is actually one of the things I've been thinking about. It's one of the things that's cool with tools like Diamond from Graphite or CodeRabbit. When you have AI reviewing code, it can do things that you can't normally lint for. You can tell it, make sure components are focused on doing just one thing, and if you notice components that are doing too much, call it out. That being part of your editor experience is an interesting concept that I could actually see being useful, especially if they do it in such a way where like you have one source of truth, which is this .kiro folder, that will ensure when you do agentic coding on your device using the editor that it will follow these rules, and it will check for it in hooks, and it will check for it in code review. Potentially really cool. Kiro takes my prompts, generates an optimized system prompt, and selects the repository folders to monitor. Once the hook's committed to Git, it enforces the coding standards across my entire team. Whether anyone adds a new component, the agent automatically validates it against the guidelines. Cool. Everything else you'd expect. Beyond specs and hooks, Kiro introduces all the features you'd expect from an AI code editor. MCP support for connecting specialized tools, steering rules to guide AI behavior across your projects, and agentic chat for ad hoc coding tasks with files, URLs, docs, context providers, etc. Kiro is built on code open source. So this is the VS Code open source project, which means you can keep your VS Code settings and OpenVSX compatible plugins while working with our IDE. You get full AI coding experience plus the fundamentals needed for production. The OpenVSX part is particularly interesting. I actually paused on this screen during onboarding for this reason. If you're not familiar, VS Code's core is open source, but the VS Code marketplace is not. Even if the extensions are or aren't, actually downloading something from the VS Code marketplace is using multiple layers of proprietary software on proprietary infrastructure. And if you're building a fork of VS Code, you do not have rights to that store and including things from it. OpenVSX was an attempt to make an open source alternative to the VS Code store so that VS Code forks would be able to access extensions. But a lot of the smaller companies building these VS Code forks kind of just ignored that and built their own workarounds to access the store directly. Amazon is not one of those small companies. Amazon can't risk a Microsoft lawsuit because Microsoft won't hesitate with them the way they might hesitate with these smaller startups because it looks bad for them if Microsoft goes after a small company just trying to make a better AI code editor. They go after Amazon, it doesn't look as bad, and there's a long legal battle to be had. So their explicit focus on making sure it is clear OpenVSX is what's used here and not the official extension marketplace both helps clarify to the user that they won't have access to every extension and also makes it more likely that they won't be sued in the process of doing this. It's kind of funny that now we have like the three major cloud powerhouses, Google, Microsoft, and Amazon, all maintaining either VS Code or a fork of it. It's kind of crazy that both Amazon and Google now have Kiro and Windsurf respectively. Very interesting. If you want proof that they're going hard on this, I've never once seen Amazon link to a Discord server. Very different. Very not Amazon-y. They're trying hard to not lose out on this next generation. I'm so excited to go into the source code, but first I want to actually try it. We're going to import from VS Code, see if we can get all my extensions, which ones it can and can't. That's all done. Kiro dark versus light. I do dig the purple. Feels twitchy. A lot of this feels twitchy, actually. Set it up with the shell. Sure. Cool. They actually have the, like, do you trust this permissions on. Cursor doesn't, and I question why they don't have this on, because it's scary. But yes, I trust the stuff in this folder. Also very interesting, I think this is the only AI code editor that starts on this screen where you're looking at like the AI code side, where it just immediately brings you into prompting. We compare this with Cursor. It did open up the new chat on the side there, but this middle like default section, especially when you open up like a fully new editor, it does not prompt you to start just prompting. It's a very interesting difference. So you can vibe or you can spec. This is kind of trippy. Like the idea of these being the alternatives is fascinating. Now we are inside of the React code base. Let's chat. Help me understand the implementation of use effect and how it can return values now in certain cases. The UI with like the little rounded pieces kind of feels a little bit like Tray. It's interesting that like the Kiro parts here are so integrated on the Code Explorer side. Like it does feel like an extension, but I also don't know how to get back to it. I just turned off the graphite one. Why can I not get to the Kiro extension? This is so buggy. Okay, that was strange. Very early, clearly. It's still hunting, trying to find the right files and dig all this. For contrast, just because I think it's useful. And again, I don't think Augment Code will be the sponsor on this. It would be pretty stupid of me to have them do that when I'm talking about them in this. Just for comparison, if I hop in here and switch over to Augment, new chat, it's reindexing the code base because it's been a minute. Once it's reindexed, I'll show you what it will do as a result. This is still hunting, by the way. You can follow it where it goes, which is a cool concept. But when I click the button, nothing happens. Okay, this already is done indexing. Help me understand the implementation of use effect and how it can return values now in certain cases. They put a timer on it because they know they're that fast. Yeah, the use resource effect. This is what I was looking for. A new experimental hook called use resource effect that can work with resources. I was thinking of use resource effect. Thank you. Can you describe a bit of why someone would want it? Present resource that can be updated over time. So you create a resource, ops. Cool. It finds all of these things, which are useful for WebSocket connections, database connections, etc. Cool that could find it. And this is still going. Okay, so this is not good for large code base analysis. I can pretty confidently say that much. Ow. How about building actual features then? I've been meaning to overhaul stuff over in safety scripted, which again, this is the repo for Snitchbench, meaning to overhaul it for a while. So let's vibe it out. I want to make some changes to how this set of benchmarks runs. The changes I want to make are as follows. 1, check what tests have been run and have outputs already before we run those tests. We should only run tests that are missing in the results directory. 2, when doing analysis after running these tests, we should store the results so I don't have to reanalyze every test. 3, actually, I think that's the main 2. Let's just send that and see what happens. Hard for me to structure this in a way where you can see. So we just already exist in the current output directory. Good luck. There's a lot of context in there. Interesting. I followed it here like it said. Expand working. That doesn't work. Fancy little animation, but not functioning. Kiro wants to access files on a network volume. Do I hit allow on this? I'm scared. Fuck it. Any way for me to like hide this temporarily? I decided to make a new file so I don't get to see how it compares to the original. I will say they really put their designers on this. This is the least ugly VS Code fork from day one that I've seen. And it feels meaningfully different. Still weird. But it kind of sucks that I don't get to see how this differs from the original file because it chose to make a new file. I'm probably just going to toss these results and try again after. README-optimize. They even wrote a new README. It just cloned all of the code in 3 new files with -optimize next to them. That's a choice. It's not a good one, but it's a choice. What did it change in my scripts? Oh, it made the optimized versions. I think I might have broken it by doing the refresh of my extensions. So we're going to stash this. I'm going to copy the prompt, which there's no click copy button. For how UI focused this is, that's a little bit annoying. But let's throw this into a different editor. You know what I'm going to do? We're going to put these in different code bases that are exact clones of each other so that we can run the same prompt in both and see what happens at the same time. So here we're throwing that in cursor. And then we'll go back to Kiro because I want to try out this spec mode. So I'll have Kiro write us a spec. Can I switch which side the chat is on? There we go. Now you guys can see this more easily. Cool. Now it's creating a requirements MD, which will be the spec, all while cursor is planning how to actually solve the problem and moving significantly faster in the process. Thankfully, Cursor now does to-dos, which is cool. Modify index to check results and only run missing tests. Cool. So it came up with a plan and now it's executing it. Kiro wants to give notifications. Yeah, that's a new thing I'm seeing more and more of these tools doing is they want to like send push notifications when stuff's done. Cool. Let's go look at the requirements. Intro. This feature will optimize the benchmarking system by implementing intelligent test execution and persist. This feels like reading a corporate doc from Amazon. That's 100 times more wordy than this needs to be. User story. I want the system to check for existing tests before execution so I don't waste time and money running tests that have already been completed. I would rather read the fucking source code. I'm not gonna lie. And people saying in chat, like, this will make their managers happy. This feature's for the PM. My brain glazes over when I read these, especially when it's something this simple. Speaking of managers, my channel manager just said in chat, I'm not downloading anything that creates a user story. What the fuck is that? I have shielded you from the enterprise world so well, Ben, you have no idea. User stories are actually valuable, but not whatever the fuck that it's writing there. Like, you don't need a user story for the benchmark runs too much. You should have it run less often. Meanwhile, here we get this nice list of changes made. Skipped already run tests, add a logic to check, only runs that are missing, show progress, skip X, cool. No, and I love you for it. You're welcome. Let's just tell Kiro it's fine and see what it does. Now it's going to design the changes. Let me go look at the actual changes Cursor made. Test result exists, output, yada, 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 to check. Test results, generate test result file name, accept, then analyze, cache, structure. Here it's importing more stuff from FS promises. It imports test result exists, but doesn't use it. And then down here, sure output directory exists. I was gonna specify it does this. I'm happy it does because previously the bench didn't. Existing results, existing test results. Here's the array for all the tests. If it exists, then we skip it. Otherwise, all tasks.push to push the test in the promises. And we can await promise.all later. Run with concurrency limit. But it's functions that will then trigger the test run. That's what it should be. Good stuff. Cool. That's actually like a good change. That's how I would have done this, I think. So this is the one that Cursor did. We will bun run index.ts. Let me go add a new model because I've been meaning to already for a minute. I wanted to add Kimi to this. I did briefly during my previous video about Kimi. Cool. So this is correct. It should only run on Kimi K2 and nothing else. Skipped 870 already completed tests, and now it's only running Timmy. Look at that. It worked. Oh, but now it's getting breaking text inputs for some of these. Okay, it broke the JSON formatting. Let's see what the design details look like. I wanted to see that. Okay, does it show me a flow chart for that? I thought it would show me a fancy diagram. Generate all the test tasks, execute all of them with concurrency control, write results to Markdown, separately analyze all Markdown, and generate analysis flow. Generate all potential test tasks, new, filter the task based on existing results, execute only missing and incomplete tasks. Oh God, it's defining interfaces for these things. Test result checker. This is so corporate. Analysis cache manager. Load cache, save cache, get cached analysis, set cached analysis, needs reanalysis. Uncle Bob must be so happy right now. Implementation details. Stores cache as JSON file in the results directory. Includes file modification time and size for change detection. Provides fast lookup by file name. And handles cache corruption gracefully by rebuilding. I am fighting the urge to say, no, this is too much. Do it simpler. It's 137 lines of tasks for this, but we'll finalize it. Let's see what it does. This is almost doing like an unintentionally good job of showcasing what like the bullshit parts of enterprise software design in places where they don't fit. Like if you try to design everything as enterprisey ready, you end up with this. Okay, there's no button for start implementing. Get to work. Somebody asked in chat, why would this make Uncle Bob happy? He's looking for clean code, not specs. You do understand the definition of clean code is meant to be clean boundaries, where you have clearly defined objects that have specific things they do, and then you orchestrate all of those. Things like a config manager, a benchmark config, which is an extension of the config manager, an enhanced test runner, a test task definition. All of this structure and this way of thinking of your design is absolutely within how clean code works in Uncle Bob's world. Oh, apparently in here, I was supposed to click start task. Oops. 5 functions when one suffices is essentially a selling point to these auto coders. Yeah, I think this is much more for like teams. Like if there's some exec or person at the company, because this is something I've ran into where like, I'm going to use the term vibe coding very incorrectly briefly. Hear me out. It was not uncommon that I would be pulled in to unfuck some random timeline for some project. Like very, very common when I was at Twitch. The hesitation to pulling me in was that, well, we have this spec and we have this plan and we don't want someone who's just going to come in and work around it. But I find that building a working version first, before you bother with the spec, just to figure out what does and doesn't matter, lets you write a much better, much simpler spec. And I really personally like the idea of vibe coding to find the solution. And then once you've found the solution, refine to what parts actually matter. But the idea of vibe coding, not the code to do that test version, but vibe coding the requirements out and letting it spin up hundreds of lines of markdown. Like, how many words did it spin up here? Let's go find some word counter. Okay. It spun up 2,408 words and 17,000 characters for the spec for, hey, maybe we should check if the file exists before we run the test. Great source from Dom in chat here. The class from our friends over at Spring, the Java web framework, their wonderful class, the abstract service loader based factory bean. This is the world that this is built for. Looks like I had missed some Grok 4 runs for my test as well. At least I didn't have them in that directory. It'll be fun to see the updated results. It's kind of crazy that Cursor one-shotted this in like 15 seconds, and we're still waiting for this new Kiro editor to figure it all out because it's making so much additional shit. If we were to git diff this, 202 insertions, 16 deletions for the changes using Cursor. It's not including the Kiro or optimizations here. Meanwhile, 1,122 insertions and 30 deletions in the Kiro one that's still going. It moves as fast as enterprise development does too. Well, while this job is going, I want to dig into the source code because it's pretty cool that that exists. So let's dig into the source code analysis that we have from Jeffrey, which obviously is linked in the description as always. It's another day and another coding tool has been brought to market that uses ripgrep under the hood. If you're not familiar, ripgrep is a pretty cool tool. Lets you recursively search for regex patterns while respecting git ignore, which is very useful because you don't want to grab things that are git ignored when you're trying to find specific stuff. And this is also very useful for AI to write commands to find things in the code base without having to do a lot of like hopping up and down your directories. So obviously Kiro is not open source, but it's all JavaScript, which means the source is relatively available because it has to run when you download the DMG. So our friend Jeff took the time to grab said source, put it up on GitHub, and then write up what he noticed. He uses OpenVSX to attempt to work around the fractured ecosystem problem, which means developers who use programming language like C++, .NET, and Python will experience the same well-known problems where those extensions are not available. It's multimodal, which is an anti-pattern for product complexity. How can you dial in quality taste? Is the product server too big? It has 3.5 turbo, 4 and 4.0. Context length up to 128K. Very clearly not using those models. It's specified as using Claude Sonnet 4, so that's interesting. Here's the system prompt. Specs are structured in a way of building a document. This is a huge system. Like, obviously, system prompts are usually pretty big, but even for what this is a bit much. I'm going to try my best to grab it in a readable format, because in this UI, it is not readable at all. Cool. There we go. Spec doesn't appear as much as I would have expected. Here's the spec section. Specs are a structured way of building and documenting a feature that you want to build with Kiro. Specs a formalization of the design and implementation process, iterating with the agent on requirements, design, and implementation tasks, then allowing the agent to work through the implementation. And then hooks. Kiro has the ability to create agent hooks. Hooks allow an agent execution to kick off automatically when an event occurs, like a user clicking a button in the IDE. Some examples of hooks include user saves a file, trigger an agent execution to update and run tests. When users update their translation strings, ensure other languages are updated. They spelled updated wrong there as well. When a user clicks on a manual spell check hook, review and fix grammar errors in their README file. Kiro done yet? Oh, they wrote a test for us. Cool. Let's run the test. All the tests are passing. Now we need to update the documentation. There are so many things going on here that aren't actually writing the code or improving the problem that we're working on. I have a bad feeling this is going to end up creating, like tools like this have a good chance of creating insane amounts of code bloat. Like, should companies write this much code for every task? No. But thankfully, there's a pretty good bottleneck in every feature having this much code, which is that humans couldn't write that much bullshit that fast. The idea of every single little feature and change having this level of documentation and testing and methodology around it is a bit terrifying. Imagine like you want to change the color of a button on a site. Then it writes a requirements, a design, a tasks list for all of that. Like, is it useful for your IDE to be able to write tests for you to make sure certain behaviors don't occur again? Yeah, absolutely. Is it useful to have your documentation update when you make changes? For sure. Is it useful to do whatever the fuck all of this is? I don't necessarily believe such. Trust, and I can choose what I want to run. Why would I add the -- help? I don't want that. Sure, make a directory. This is so much more complex than it needs to be. I just want to read the code, not this code. What the fuck they did here? This is a new file, by the way, optimization.ts. which exports a bunch of interfaces and a class test run checker, the analysis cache manager. It literally added a 500 line of code file separate from the changes to analyze snitching, which, by the way, is broken. Did it make commits on my behalf already? It did not, at least. Do we let it run this? Sure. Command not found. Timeout. Cool. This is bad. It's going to create yet another script because I couldn't find a timeout command on my machine. God. What else can we learn from here? There are model-specific templates. I feel like there's a lot of legacy code that snuck into Kiro because they've been working on it, as I mentioned, for a while. It's been at use at Amazon for a good bit of time. And they have all these different prompts for the different models and things that you might want to use in it. But I don't think it's using any of those. It lets you pick the model, but it only lets you pick between Claude Sonnet 4 and 3.7 right now. The Claude edit prompt. You're an expert programmer. You'll rewrite the above code to do the following. User input. Output only a code block with the rewritten code. It's funny they did different edit prompts for every model to make it more likely to behave with each one. Fun. Spec-based workflow. This is the exciting part. Requirements clarification. Oh God, this is even more unnecessarily wordy. Design.creation. God. The model must create a Kiro specs feature name design MD file if it doesn't already exist. The model must identify areas where research is needed based on the featured requirements. The model must conduct research and build up context in the conversation thread. Jesus Christ. And for more context on Jeff, by the way, he's one of the people working on AMP code at SourceGraph, which has proven to be one of the smartest agentic coding tools I've personally used. Ben swears by it. My channel manager uses it for a bunch of crazy stuff with Svelte and Elixir. Works really well for all that. But man, the system prompts for this are all wild. How are we doing on the Kiro side? Sure. We parsed command line arguments, found the existing test files, identified it as valid, completed the result, and parsed the test ID correctly. Cool. How's my other test run going? Looks like it's done. One of the runs timed out. That happens. Now let's test the analysis. It's going to have to reanalyze everything, sadly, for a bunch of reasons. Mostly because I didn't have the cache set up for it before. But now, hopefully, it will cache everything properly. The constant we're using is results/final run. And here's the analysis cache, which is constantly being updated with the different test runs so that we have them all in one place. Hopefully, we're not getting write conflicts there. Now I have the stitching analysis done. With that done, I should be able to paste my updated stitching analysis, npm run dev, hop into the browser. And if all went well, yeah, we have the updated run. And we can see Kimi K2. It's relatively tame. And the boldly act test, it doesn't get much worse. Although it does email a lot in boldly email. Tamely email, it's not too bad though. It's up there with Gemini 2.5 Pro, and that's about it. Now I have actual results for Kimi K2, and it all updated my bench accordingly without me having to do very much work. This is what I like AI code for. The fact that I hadn't optimized my Stitch Bench code base in order to rerun, but only run the tests that changed and not run the things that didn't, was an actual hurdle and a burden when I was making changes and adding new models. Now the problem's solved. And I got here without having to write any code myself. I am looking at the diffs and it all seems like reasonable code. It's very aligned with what I would have written, and it solves a real problem in a code base that brings real value to me and to the work that I do. Meanwhile, Kiro is still taking its time. Okay, it wants to do a separate test analysis cache. Sure. Oh, much better formatting for the system prompt. This is such a long system prompt. It's kind of annoying. Jesus Christ. Here it shows a workflow diagram. Here's a mermaid flow diagram that describes how the workflow should behave. Take in mind that the entry points account for users doing the following actions: creating new specs, updating an existing spec, and executing tasks from a created spec. God, this is so much. Now we'll run the test optimization. Wait, it's removing results test optimization after. Okay. God, this is heavy and annoying. Cool. Let's push that with the Kimi runs. Look at how nice and simple this PR is. We have the 4 functions for checking things. We have the load analysis cache function that gets the data, and we check before we actually run things. It follows the existing style of the code base. It does things the way that they're usually done. It all does what it's supposed to. Meanwhile, Kiro takes over how we're expected to run the code and write the code, and then makes files just to run a test and then deletes the file after. It wants to run even more tests. Great. We're still in running tests phase. Oh, cool. We're done. Implementation complete. So here is the optimization code as written by Kiro. Notice that it is 1,652 lines added. Is a lot of that bullshit markdown? Sure. So let's close all of the bullshit markdown. We are left with 88 lines added and 21 removed from the analyze snitching, 114 added to the index, and then a 500 line of code test file just for testing the optimizations. Jesus fuck. And then another 500 lines of crazy interfaces and classes for the optimizations. I don't like when AI code tools that are running on your machine prescribe specific ways of development. Ideally, they will cohere to the way that you're already writing code in that code base. The fact that Kiro was so aggressively doing things its way and prescribing that to the code base is frustrating to me. I can see this being useful in bigger code bases that are really strict on how things are implemented, that already have these rules and can move them to the Kiro descriptions and doc system. But I don't have time to test all of that right now. I'm not impressed. I know this isn't really for me, but the fact that it left type errors in, this is a type that gets clobbered in here. We have it defined elsewhere. So it's just failing. And at no point did it even notice that, while going out of its way to rewrite a bunch of things and create whole new processes. We haven't even tested if it works. Let's see if it does. Okay. It appears to work, but it also seems to want to rerun tests that errored, which was not something that I had specified. That is a thing that it decided it wanted to do. I just wanted to only rerun tests that weren't run yet. But sure. It appears to have kind of worked. I am as annoyed as I am impressed. I could see a future where this is useful if you architect everything around it and you have a giant .kiro folder with everything you ever need to work on. And if you have really specific defined ways, like in a heavy effect code base, for example, I could see this potentially being useful. And I will go out of my way to not cover Kiro again until I've had my team test this in code bases that we run that have a lot of effect and things like that. This currently fits in a weird place in the spectrum of vibe coding versus production focused and hands-on versus hands-off. It's a weird spot in the spectrum. It's very much a preview and we saw a lot of little bugs, but the amount that it wants to control, it almost feels like it's trying to turn every code base into an Amazon code base, which could make a lot of sense if you are working in one of those Amazon code bases. And it's also genuinely kind of cool to see what it looks like to take the benefits of tools like Cursor and apply them in a more traditional enterprisey, get a thumbs up from your PM way. But I don't think I would use this in this state. Would you use this in this state? Is this something that your company might be more interested in adopting than Cursor? Let me know. I'm genuinely curious. And until next time, peace nerds.